Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Wendi Swanson, welcome to the conversation today.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Orlando. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the DNA of leadership, how leadership can be measured, what leadership really is, some of those different aspects we're going to try to unpack together in our conversation today. As we get started, I wanted to share Wendi's bio with everybody. Wendi Swanson is an internationally recognized strategic leadership consultant, facilitator, and program developer with a focus on unleashing the heartbeat of every organization, its people. Through authenticity and intentionality with a little edge, Wendi encourages a human-centered approach to growth, dials down on change systems, and redefines what it means to be a leader. Wendi gets to the heart of change by working directly with management and frontline to create growth at all levels of the organization. She has delivered workshops on talent acquisition and development, performance management, organizational and individual growth, and leadership for mid to large size companies across the globe. She has worked with companies such as Godiva Chocolatier, Best Buy, Yankee Candle, Ashley Furniture, David Yurman, New York, Lazy Boy, Home Furnishings, and many, many more. I could go on and on, Wendi, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
I think that covers it, John. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, really, you have a tremendous background, and I'm excited to get your take on this idea of the DNA of leadership. And perhaps before we really dive on in, I want to start by just dispelling this idea of kind of the great man idea of leadership. Like you have in the world of leadership and leadership theory and leadership archetypes and such. People often think of like the 6'6", guy that walks into the room and has a commanding presence, and everyone's eyeballs turn to him, right?
Right.
And so there's kind of that tends to be called the great man kind of philosophy around leadership, and like you're born with all of these traits and characteristics, and you have that charisma. And literally you're tall and good looking and you're a man and all of these things, right? So this is kind of the stereotype that persists in the minds of many people. But when we're talking about the DNA of leadership, we're not talking about any of that. Like, let's throw that out the window.
Let's do.
That's not what we're talking about. And we're going to talk about what really matters in fostering leadership within ourselves, our ability to lead others, and how we can measure that within ourselves and others.
Yeah. John, I'm so glad that you started there because I don't know about you, I'm grateful that leadership is evolving.
Yeah.
I think back to exactly what you're talking about in this. I call it title leadership.
Yeah.
Back in my day, you were a leader if you were the CEO, if you were, it was all about title. And as leadership begins to evolve, I think about my background, and I make myself sound so old. I'm not, I'm 56. I graduated from college with a business degree. And John, leadership wasn't even offered as a course of study
Yeah.
because it truly was. You're either born a leader or not. And I like to make the joke really in the comparison of, is somebody born to be a surgeon? No, it's learned. And there's a educational process and there's great responsibility. And guess what? You operate on a bunch of cadavers before you actually get to be in the operating room. Thank goodness for those of us who have had surgeries, before you actually get a real patient. And so, leadership was just this, you're born or you're not. And I think about a surgeon, and you're not either born a surgeon or not. I mean, it takes, number one, an interest. It takes a willingness to assimilate the information, education, to practice. And had we have started to think about leadership like that years ago, I just wonder if as we navigated through this, one of the most difficult times in the workplace during COVID, would we have been in a different place? And I can't answer that question. I just am grateful that leadership is not title. It's not the big man uh,
Yeah.
picture that so many of us have had. And I'm grateful that now, even today, you can get a doctorate in leadership strategy, and there's all kinds of sexy titles. Bottom line is, there's a lot of leaders out there that are saying, I want to get better, which I'm grateful for that.
Well, me too. And everything I said, it's not to say that you can't have a 6'6" charismatic man be a great
Right,
leader. Like
right.
obviously they could be a great leader too, right?
Sure.
But you could also have, a 4'11", woman be a great
That's
leader.
me.
In
Thank
fact,
you. Yeah, that, yeah.
are you a 4'11"? So like
Well,
actually,
I'm
so I'm
5'1", so I
5'1".
hit 5 feet.
So
Yeah.
I'm a university professor, and literally our university president, I don't know actually how tall she is, but she's quite short. She's Filipino,
Uh-huh.
and she's probably like 4'10", honestly. And she's one of the most brilliant, powerful, dynamic people I've ever met, right? And
Mhm.
so like literally there's the whole range, the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
And she also, just to highlight my university president, she categorizes herself as an introvert, right?
Mhm.
So historically, you have to be charismatic and extroverted and, blah, 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 all these different kind
Yeah.
of stereotypical characteristics. And that's not to say she can't get out in front of people and she can't talk and blah, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
but yeah, she characterizes herself as an introvert, someone who recharges in a different way.
Right.
And that kind of flies in the face of what historically people thought. Now, to your point, thankfully, we have leadership studies. And in fact, I'm the department chair in the organizational leadership department where we have leadership studies and things like that. But
Mhm.
even though we have that, there are plenty of people, even at the university or in the community, in local business, who don't feel like
Mhm.
it's something that needs to be studied. They feel like, to this day, they feel like it's just something that you just do, like you just by virtue of becoming a founder or a CEO, all of a sudden you are a leader, you become a great leader.
Right.
And we know better, right? There is position power, there is position leadership, but that doesn't mean it's good.
Yep. That's right.
You can be a leader and be a crappy leader, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
we want to help people learn how to be good leaders. We want them to learn
Yeah.
how to be healthy, productive leaders, people who can empower those around them. And
Mhm.
and that's a different thing, right?
Yeah. John, I was talking to one of my dear friends and a mentor of mine, Bruce Herskovitchy, last week. And he's just this brilliant leader. And, I have seen him grow, and he's seen me grow over the last, 20, 25 years. And as I was listening to him, I said, Bruce, you've got to be an executive coach because our leaders need what you have to offer. You are just brilliant. And he laughed and he said, Hell no. And I said, Bruce, like, why? And he said something, John, that I have not been able to get out of my mind. I've just been thinking about it. He said, I don't have the patience
Mm,
because there are so many leaders out there who care more about being right than getting it right.
yeah,
And I've been thinking about that, and you are so right. I hate to start this out on a negative tone. It's just true. There are so many bad leaders out there. And so I was reading a Gallup study, and it said 70% of the variance in employee engagement is attributable to leadership quality. And John, only 21% of US employees strongly agree that they trust their organizational leadership.
yeah, yeah. And
Like,
trust is
this is
everything. Trust is
sad.
foundational to everything,
And if I
right?
don't trust my leadership, 33% of the labor force didn't come back after COVID. Some
Yeah,
due to retirement. People got really creative. They realized they didn't need to make as much money as they did. And so the people that we have in our organization, they're precious. And if we are not leading them well,
yeah,
they've got something we don't have, and it's choice.
yeah, yeah. And the pendulum swings, labor market wise, it swings. And for a long time, as we were coming out of the pandemic, we were talking about the Great Resignation, and we were talking about quiet quitting, and we were talking about like the employees and workers had all the leverage, all the power. The
Mhm.
pendulum swung back a bit, and
Sure.
now there's more leverage on the side of employers, but the pendulum swings back and forth. And the bottom line is, in a labor market that still has severe skill deficiencies and skill gaps,
Mhm.
that in the long run, employees and workers have more leverage. And so employers need to just make sure that they're hospitable places for people to want to go to work. That means leaders have to be the types of leaders where they create, engaging, psychologically safe environments where people want to go, where they can feel fulfilled, et cetera. And you said something a moment ago that I just want to double click on for a second. Most leaders, well, I won't say most, there are many leaders who aren't what I would call like the greatest leaders in the world. They're not particularly great. We might even say they're kind of bad leaders. Does that mean they're nefariously bad? No, I don't think so. Like most leaders who aren't good leaders aren't nefariously bad leaders. They don't wake up in the morning thinking, how am I going to exploit my people today? How am I
Right.
going
How am I going
to,
to suck today as a leader?
yeah,
Yeah.
nobody, there might be some people out there that are thinking, how can I take advantage of people around me? But those are sociopaths and those are rare, right?
That's right.
Most people want to do well. They wake up and they try to
That's right.
do the best they can. They just don't know any better.
Mhm.
They model what they do based on what they've seen other people do. And to your point, leadership is a developed competency set and skill set. And so if they haven't developed those skills, all they can do is base it off of what they've seen other people do, what's been modeled for them. And a lot of times they've seen unhealthy things modeled. And so they
That's right.
just perpetuate, right?
That's right.
And so, I want to say that, to provide some grace for people who are trying, who are good people, who are
Right.
trying, who don't have
That's right.
nefarious intent, but still are probably putting their foot in their mouth, are probably
Mhm.
stepping in landmines unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And if you take some time, get an executive coach. If you take some time, get some leadership training. If you take some time and do the things necessary to develop yourself, it can make all the difference in the world. And you mentioned a minute ago as well, kind of this idea of the ego driving,
Right.
my need to be right rather than getting it right.
Yep.
And that would be one of the first things I say to anybody. Like, just fostering, if you can start from a place of fostering intellectual humility within yourself,
Yep.
in your leadership,
Yep.
that will get you so far
Mhm.
because nobody knows everything. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody has all the skills. Nobody has all the competencies developed. Even the best leaders out there don't know it all, right? And so,
Right.
what you really need is to just know that you don't know it all. Know that you need to surround yourself with good people. Know that you need the
Mhm.
input of those around you, and foster intellectual humility and stay curious, so that you can continue to develop. And if you're willing to do that,
Yeah.
then over time you will improve, you will get better,
Mhm.
and you'll
Yeah.
become a better leader, and you'll be more supportive of your people around you. And people will also be more willing to give you grace as you're developing because they see that you're open and that you're trying
Mhm.
and that you have that humility rather than that arrogance.
Yeah. John, you make it sound so simple. So,
Well, I always tell my students, it's not rocket science, but it is incredibly difficult
yeah. Sure.
because everything that we're talking about, it requires consistency, and
Right.
consistency is hard, and it
Well,
and it and it kind of runs counter to much of kind of our human nature, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I'm so grateful that humility and empathy and curiosity and some of those things have started to become essentials in leadership characteristics. Strategy, yes, and you can hire somebody to do that, and software can help you do that, and AI can, there's
Mhm.
just this whole gamut. And so, when I opened my business in 2016, which was primarily focused on developing leaders, still is. I still do a lot of work with retail. Retail has really been the first part of my career. And what happens in retail, and we probably all know this. I'm a salesperson, and this actually happened to me. I'm 15 years old, and I become a really great salesperson at 16. And at 17, they promoted me to assistant manager. Why? Because my assistant manager had quit the morning before. And so, our best salespeople become our managers. And John, you know this as well as I do. The best managers are not usually the best salespeople. And what happens is if I'm the best salesperson and I get promoted, there's very little training in retail. I mean, you got to just figure
Yeah.
out how to do the schedules and how to do the inventory and how to do the training and the recruiting and the all of the things. And yet still what I'm really good at is being a great salesperson. So what happens is I'm a great salesperson and now I'm the manager. I don't know how to delegate. Delegation, what's that? And so I'm doing it all. Well, eventually this person continues to get promoted up the chain. And then eventually what do we have? We have a leadership team that has gotten there not by developing themselves necessarily. They've learned from trial and error. They've muscled it through, and so there's this leadership team that is just lacking the basic skill sets of coaching, of communication, of feedback, of leadership language. And so, I just stopped before I opened my business and went, there is not a shortage in information. Like what you just said, we know what
Right.
leadership
Yeah.
looks like. We know that leadership can be measured and it's measured by followership. I love what oh my goodness, I will think of it in a minute. Anyway, John Maxwell, thank you very
Mhm.
much. So
Yeah.
John Maxwell says, if you want to know if you're leading, just, one day take a walk, stop and look back. Is anyone actually following you? And if they're not, you're
Right.
not leading, you're just simply taking a walk. So we know that the measurement of leadership is followership. And so when you get to that level of leadership and you stop and you look back and you go, are people following me because I am their CEO? Or are people following me because they are inspired and they want my influence and they trust me? And there's just this whole new leadership language that, quite frankly, John, I'm really excited that we're finally at the place that we are.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We've come a long, long way. You know, certainly, over previous generations, but even just in the last decade or two, since I've kind of been working in this arena, we've come so far, and it's awesome to see where we've come. But on the other hand, I also see, there are always pendulum swings,
Mhm.
and where we are at, currently from a kind of socio-political standpoint, where organizations are wrestling with, currently within that environment and trying to figure out what they're going to be doing, and in responding to that environment, it raises a whole bunch of challenges, right? And issues, and how are leaders going to respond? And so we're today, I think, in need as much as ever, perhaps more than ever, or at least more than in recent generations, in need of like really good, strong, effective leaders, people that are able to respond to a complex, ever-changing, challenging environment. People who have courage, integrity, people who are willing to stand up for the marginalized. And again, nothing I'm saying here is new. Nothing I'm saying here is rocket science. This is all stuff people have said 1,000 times, but it's worth saying over and over and over again because we see plenty of examples where it's not happening. And if it's not happening consistently, then that means there's still tons of work to do.
Well, and that's the most common question that I get is we have all of this information available to us more than we've ever had. And so why are we only at 28% of employees who are saying, I believe my leader's okay. The rest of the 72% are saying no, 82, whatever that number is, right? They're saying no, I don't believe that. So we have more information than we ever have. And I think, when we look down at root cause and how are we going to get that 28% to 30% that believe that their leaders are great and 40%. And my approach, John, is I am really passionate about providing experiences that catapult immediate change rather than lecture that provides information. I mean, we have proved over and over information is not implementation. And,
Yeah.
that old adage, knowledge is power, it's just not true. I don't think it's ever been true. Applied knowledge is power. And
Mm,
so when I work with leaders, where I start is awareness. Because leaders look at their organization and they go, I don't understand why we're here. And I do this experiential exercise that is powerful with ELT teams And we do it mostly with C-suite. There's some VPs that can be in the room just depending on their ability to handle difficult conversations because it's we get real in this retreat. And I sit all of them around a circle and they're facing out, not at each other, not looking at each other, because I want to simulate the silos that happen in organizations, which is one of the things that happens with ineffective leadership. And sometimes the leaders know that that's happening and they just don't understand why and they want to get to the root of it.
Hmm.
So what I do is I have each of them as they're not facing each other and they're experiencing silos. I give them flip charts and I put them in different rooms and I say, okay, I need your top three priorities this year. What are you going to do? What are you going to accomplish? We come back, marketing posts theirs. And, nobody has seen this up until now. Marketing posts theirs. And you're smiling, you know exactly what's going to happen. Operations posts theirs. Finance posts theirs. We go all the way through the departments and I look over at the CEO, and the CEO is just like, how did we get here? And by the time I get to the CEO, he's seeing how all of these silos, I make them, put their hands out, and I'm like, all of these departments are heading in different directions. So I have them say, what's falling through the cracks if all of these departments are out of alignment, because this is where we need to go. And if we do this, we're nowhere near this. And so when each of those leaders can experience how out of alignment we are versus me standing up and saying, hey, you're out of alignment. They're like, no, we're not. Yes, you are. Right. It becomes a debate. And so as we can help leaders with awareness, not only as to where they are, more importantly, to do root cause. Why are they there? And then they experience now we have a starting point because we've all experienced the gap versus me coming in and saying, hey, here's the gap. And they go, you know nothing about my business.
Not only are they often out of alignment, like you just illustrated, but often they end up competing. Yeah, like their goals
Right.
are competing one
Marketing's
with
more
another.
important. Right?
Yeah,
Marketing and sales are always like, it's marketing's fault. No, it's sales fault.
yeah, and so yeah, and again to reiterate what we were talking about earlier, it's not like they all don't have the best interests of the organization at
That's right.
heart, right? They just have different lenses. And
Right.
because they have completely different lenses, and because they're not talking to each other, they have totally different perspectives on what's going to drive the organization forward. And unless there's a way to bring them together, to have those collaborative conversations, unless there's leadership to help facilitate that, that's always going to happen.
Right. Well,
And
and
so,
sometimes they just need to experience that because, they listen to a great podcast like yours. They, listen to a TEDx. They're just not there yet with the awareness piece until they actually experience it. And I think that's where, we go from being out of alignment to bringing that together and moving forward is that experience and awareness.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Wendi, this has just been a super fun conversation. I note the time, and I'm going to need to let you go here in a minute. But before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you and find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah. Okay. My information I think will be in the show notes, right, John?
Mhm.
Okay. So I would say you're welcome to email me, pick up the phone and call me. If I can't, get back with you that day, my commitment is within 24 hours, I will call you because I love to have these conversations and I'm just passionate about the opportunities that are out there. And I would just say to your listeners, leadership is learned. And so, whether you do a leadership assessment, I'm a huge DISC fan. The place to start is to objectively assess where am I? Because if you know where you are and you know where you're going, you think about navigation, it's always going to ask you two places. Where are you? Where are you going? And then there may be a couple detours in there because there's a road closed or a challenge. Bottom line is, if you know where you are, we can help you know where you're going and map the course. And I think it's just a great place to start to get aware. And once you're aware, we can do anything together. So I would love to help your listeners with assessing where they are and putting together a plan forward.
I love it. I love it. Wendi, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the
Thank
audience to
you.
reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Wendi can do for you. Check out her many wonderful resources. Check out her podcast. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.